Hello there. It is Monday, December 1st, 2025, and it's 12:47 p.m. And yeah, my dude, I'm coming to you from the beautiful little town of Clayton, Georgia, right outside of White Birch Provisions, a nice little coffee place, a little spot where I'm enjoying a large latte. That's good. And yeah, biked here after helping at my parents' church with some Christmas tree decorations, and it's pretty chilly out. What is the temperature, in fact? Let us see. 41 degrees, but it feels like 35, it says. So I don't know if that's because of rain, wind or what. Let's see. Why does it feel so cold, my dude? Dang. It's supposed to possibly snow today at 10 p.m. That's fun. Cool. Well, what a difference a few days make. I guess this is like 5 days since I made my last clip, which, surprising my parents was successful. I got to deliver my line in pretty much the exact way that I hoped to. However, I'm not good at you have to project your voice into the back of the room or whatever. And so I got out of the van and I was like, did anyone order a prodigal son? Shout out to my dad, by the way. And he was like, what? And I was like, sorry, take two. But anyway, shout out to my mom too, for that matter. It was a very successful reunion. It was fun. Thanksgiving Eve day, and then got to hang out and just kind of catch up. And it's been smooth sailing ever since, my dude. I was feeling a little tired this morning. Got up early so that I could say goodbye to my dad, who's out of town now. Shout out to my dad. And so this coffee really feels like it's bringing me back to life. I got up at 6 a.m., which is not super early. In fact, I would probably consider that borderline sleeping in on certain days of the trail. So, you win some, you lose some. But in any case, I do feel like I'm coming back online, so that's great, because I was like, man, I don't even know if I have the energy to speak quite yet, but I'm always wrong about that, so thankfully I was in this case too. But yeah, I guess this is sort of like a concluding clip, my plan from this point, now that the ride is over and thankfully all is said and done, is to basically, I have like a subscription to this hosting platform until June of 2026. And so I think that I will continue to utilize it for my own purposes. Mostly just, I think it'd be fun to post weekly digests of my life. Not necessarily for you, dear listener, but certainly for myself. I like to indulge that person as well. And so I think moving forward, I'm just going to release Notebook LM podcasts every week about whatever recordings I happen to make for that week. Because, again, I've tried in the past to continue the momentum of recording something every single day and having it be compelling content. And while for me it is still compelling content, it's certainly not stuff that I think most people would be interested in. The small amount of people who were ever even interested in the more fantastic things that I was doing. So yeah, that's my plan, and I'm sticking to it, my dude. So yeah, I do have a few list items, and other than that, I mean, dude, what else is there to say, the fat lady has sung. Let's see, though. I just exited out of my list, which is the opposite of what I wanted to do. So, let's see. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So I was noticing, just by coincidence, the other day, now that I have access to all my things and all my tools and all my toys, I was noticing when I was using my computer very leisurely, instead of it being like an orchestrated event, which is kind of what it felt like anytime I brought it out when I was on the road. It was a big commitment to take my computer out, and I was just like, dude, I don't even know if I want to go through all this. But in any case, I was reviewing the original route that I had made back before I even left for this trip, which previously had me going to Colorado and then going due south from there to, I guess, Texas or something like that, and then taking the southern tier back to the East Coast and going down to Key West and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, the route that I originally made and the route that I ended up doing were very, very similar in terms of mileage. I think I did the math wrong, but when I made the note, the thing that I mentioned was that I had done my route that I ended up doing was 38 miles longer than the route that I had originally made. So I thought that was kind of cool because, I'm very content and at peace with the ride being over and it being over at the time that it stopped. But when you're well, as I said in an Instagram reel I made about cleaning up the Blue Ridge Parkway, it's when you're creating your own task. Well, basically, if you're making your own thing, you have to make your own rules. Basically, when you're creating your own task. I'm getting distracted. Let me try to stretch my legs. So basically, since this isn't like the Appalachian Trail or any given route per se, like there was no actual end and everything was pretty arbitrary to that point. I love it when people try to park in the spots. Like there's 1,000 parking spots here, and this guy who's pulling in right now, I'm occupying 2 of them to be fair, but he was going for both, and I was just like, dude, come on. There's plenty of spots. You don't got to be where I'm at, and I don't got to be where you're at. You know what I'm saying? It's all good though. But yeah, so you have to define your own parameters, and since I did, stopping where I did, I'm totally fine with that, and it's just interesting that had I actually followed the route that I originally made, which I abandoned after the first day, at least as far as that route being something that was static. Sorry for taking up so many spots.
Where are you from?
Well, from here, really. But I just finished a cross-country bike ride, so I still got a little bit of nervous energy,
Georgia, California?
Pretty much, yeah. I went, from Dillard all the way to San Francisco, then down the coast, and then Arizona, and then took a train.
From below Savannah.
Yeah?
A place called Shelmet Bluff to San Diego.
Nice. I bet.
We went from east to west, which is against the wind.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Well, likewise. So yeah, what am I saying? Well, I guess basically, at this point, I'm now feel like I'm beating a dead horse just because I've struggled to even say these words for the past what feels like 5 minutes. But yes, basically, what I set out to do, I accomplished, even though it was a completely different version of the total idea of what my original conception was, in terms of the time and the mileage. Basically, if you were to think of me as a gas tank, what I ended up doing versus what I planned to do, they were pretty much parity, which is kind of cool. I think that's kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? And I think that you do. So, let's move on. I feel like I'm spitting all over my phone. That's crazy. Here's a little note that I wrote the other day. If you can talk to anybody, you can talk to everybody. Roasted. Yeah, it really do be like that, though. It counts for both good and bad things. Yeah, I made a note about drinking, but we can just skip that. Let's see. Okay, I'll just read this as I wrote it, or at least as AI rewrote it. Why I wear black. I wear black because it's easier to hide, and it's hard for me to deal with people sometimes because I guarantee a meaningful interaction, and that's exhausting. So it's not just hiding in the woods, it's also hiding in plain sight of humans. Sure, why not? Yeah, ever since getting back, ever since getting on the train, really, I've had quite a few bike woes. I have now had just about as many flats as I did for the entire trip just since getting to New Orleans, which is kind of crazy. When I first got back, I have a pretty standard protocol for what I do when I enter a new area, or maybe not even, maybe more so return to a familiar area, which I like to go through my stuff and kind of do a little audit and just kind of refamiliarize myself with what I have and where it lives, just in case anything comes up and I'm like, oh yeah, I have this, that, or the other that I can use for this, that, or the other. And in fact, that reminds me, I have this down vest that I have no idea where it is. and that's bothersome to me. I don't lose things very often or misplace them, and so when I do, it's a bit of a thorn in my side. But my bike, I've had like 4 flats. My dad actually, shout out to my dad, had to come rescue me the other day. I was attempting to bike to Franklin, North Carolina, which is a modest 26 miles away. And I got about 14 or 15 miles in, and then I was like, this feels a little squishy. This feels like a flat tire. And lo and behold, my rear tire had gone flat yet again. I have no idea what was going on. Still haven't really located anything new. I've gone through the tire twice now in exacting detail. And yeah, ultimately, I was just very, very glad that I didn't have like 4 flats in a row right when I left, because that would have been very, very demoralizing. I mean, I probably just would have ended up buying a new tire if that was like something that was that consistent. But I'm very glad and grateful that if there were going to be a bunch of back-to-back flats or otherwise like bike-related issues, that they seem to usually happen at a convenient time throughout this trip, whether it was my bike rack breaking in Kansas City or my rear wheel breaking a couple hundred miles outside of Reno, or I don't know, any number of other more minor things. I can't remember if anything else happened that's like particularly memorable. But it's like, it's nice to feel like the universe is on your side a little bit. Like everyone gets a piece of the pie when it comes to having to deal with some BS, if you will. And it's nice if like your piece is sometimes like not so bad or whatever. So yeah, bike woes, dude. And I think that I switched out my tires because I had a set of tires that I'd taken off that they still have a decent amount of life in them, and they're also wider. So I put those on the other day, and it seems like the front tire might have a slow leak in it as well, but these are completely different tires, and the slow leak is on the front, not the back, so it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with the rim. But yeah, it's kind of weird. And it's really cold here, generally speaking. Like, not really, really cold, but it's uncomfortably cold. You can't really just sit outside, even though that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Not without the proper gear, anyway. And so, I might switch over, generally speaking, to walking as my preference, especially since there's like not necessarily a ton of things to do for me right now, per se. Like, I don't have a job, obviously, and I'm not going towards anything that necessarily sets up the entirety of my day on any given day. So walking so far is a good way to square that circle, because if I want to walk down here to Clayton, it's about 5 miles. And then, you know what? I'll be darned if turning around and going right back the way I came isn't another 5 miles on top of that. So if I come down here and do a little bit of work or whatever, then, that's probably going to take at least 4 hours, depending on the degree of the work and all that kind of stuff. And speaking of work, I came here the other day. This is a shout out to Gemini 3, Google's, AI. And I got to say, I'm very impressed. I had heard all my moonshot mates, Peter Diamandis, let's see, who else? Dave Blunden, who else? Ishmael, is his name Ishmael? That doesn't sound right at all. I can't remember his name. And then there's another guy, Alex Wiesner-Gross. Shout out to Alex Wiesner-Gross. That dude's crazy cool. Very, very smart, and funny in a very, very weird way. But, they were glorifying what Gemini 3 was going to be able to do, and I was like, that's really cool. Like, they were saying that it was like a stronger coder even than Anthropic's Claude, which historically Claude has kind of, I don't know, it seems like it's been the offering, the AI offering that was best at coding. I haven't done like a lot of coding stuff intensively, obviously, but that's the reputation that I'm aware of. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use Gemini 3 because I have this idea. One of the things that's annoying about Notebook LM to me is that you can't do a bulk YouTube. Like, again, I'm not using this tool the way that it's supposed to be used, but I have all my podcasts that are on YouTube on a different channel, and I wanted to upload them into Notebook LM, but I didn't want to have to copy paste like 100 URLs and then also kind of get confused about whether or not I missed one, because every time you input something into Notebook LM, depending on what it is, it will sometimes change the title of what it is. Like if I upload a transcript from one of my podcasts. It gives it its own name, so I have no idea if it's a transcript I have no idea what the transcript is, And I don't know, I think maybe YouTube actually keeps the name, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But in any case, I was like, okay, well, this is annoying. And, as with all things that I do in terms of coding, I know that if there is something that is a repetitive manual task where you have to basically just click things and put things somewhere else, that can be automated. And so I came to the place that I'm at now, White Birch, and I sat down and I was like, okay, well, I want to create like an auto importer because this is some bull squish, I'm not going to sit here like some kind of like unenlightened pleb and just enter all this information. Like, I'm going to make the computer do it for me. And I swear, man, like, before my latte was even cool enough to drink, I had already coded up the entirety of the Chrome extension that I wanted to work. And it was better than I even imagined. Like, the night before, when I realized that it would be a useful thing for me to create, I was thinking about how the workflow would actually work, because it actually goes between separate windows. You have to start in YouTube, and then you have to take that information and go over to Notebook LM. So I was trying to think, like, what would be the best way for that to happen, so that Chrome didn't get confused or drop any of the data packets, as it were. But the way that it did it was just so much better than I could have even imagined. And it works. So I have now organized my Notebook LM library in so much as all of my podcasts being present and accessible in their entirety, so I can look at them for any kind of insight into my previous life at those intervals and increments. And yeah, dude, I mean, it was so easy. It was crazy. I can only imagine if I had a more technical application, it would just be fun to troubleshoot the best way to create some sort of automation within that system, But hey, for another day, I suppose. So yeah, my dude, that's something I did. That was cool. Let's see. Bike woes. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting being back in this area. I will say, like, I was thinking about it the other night as I laid in bed as well, and I was like, I kind of feel like at this point, my parents' house up here in the mountains, which is not the home that I grew up in historically, it does actually feel more like home to me than I think even my home used to before we moved up here. My parents kind of both moved up here full time, very close to retiring, and so it's been a house that, like, I don't have any childhood memories in, but for sure I've spent a lot of time here in the past 5 or 6 years, maybe even 7 years. I think that was the number I was reflecting on in my bed. I was like, wow, it's been 7 years before, since I have used this house as like my house. Shout out to my parents. Trying to be helpful while I'm there and respectful, learning how to turn on and off the lights, which is a lot more complicated than you might think. But yeah, it's kind of cool that I have this as a base camp. And I was just thinking on like how interesting it is that I have so quickly fallen back into it feeling like it's just being home. Because when I was going to Franklin the other day when I had the flat tires, I didn't even think about going to a cafe until I was like, I don't know, a few miles into the ride. I was just going to go there and just kind of look around and then bike back, which would have been awesome because it would have been a tailwind. And it was a headwind the entire way, which I had to just endure. But I'm used to that at this point. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting just how quickly, it's not even been a week yet, and I already am back into the feeling of this just being home. And so the ability to find novelty and to step outside of familiarity is actually difficult, and it's something that I already feel like I have to purposefully kind of impose on myself and chase and be aware of, because again, it was that automaticity of just being like, because if I had gone to any other town on the bike ride, I would have been obsessed with the idea that meant that I was going to get coffee and something to eat. And the thought didn't even cross my mind just because of how many times I've gone to Franklin. It's such a known quantity that it didn't really trigger the other types of, thinking that would lead to me trying to make it more adventurous. It was just very, very static. I did get chased by some stupid dogs too. That was annoying, but Also, probably some of the worst dogs that I've seen for months, on the trail. Didn't really have an issue with that per se. But in any case, that was just an interesting finding. And what else do we got? Ah, yes, okay, this is cool. So, I guess if I had to sum up what I am most grateful for from this trip, I would have to say that it is like walking away with this new idea of the importance of framing things in your own life and in your own life's story, especially when things are less than desirable or preferred, specifically using AI to flip those kinds of situations in order to see some kind of silver lining, even if it is manufactured, Like, I don't really care about the truth or the falseness of something because it comes down to whether or not it's useful, and reframing things has been extremely useful for me. And so, with that as sort of a general vague backbone, the whole concept of the organismic being, agency, gratitude, and generative drive, which, the last three, agency, gratitude, generative drive, those were like big pillars that I really was enjoying thinking about even before my trip, because again, and I highly recommend listening to it, the Paul Conti and Andrew Huberman conversation about mental health, the 4-part series, that really just impressed upon me like very, very effective ways of assessing health, improving relationships, and then whatever the fourth one was. And that was just like a cool foundation to really use in a practical sense. And then tying in that Carl Rogers concept of organismic being on top of everything was just a very, very useful and just very useful. I can't champion enough, for me personally, the effectiveness of outsourcing your emotional and cognitive overloads onto something that is detached and third person and third party. Like just taking the time to talk to yourself, as I'm doing now, and then putting that into some sort of a tool that analyzes what you're saying and looks for elements that you direct it to focus on, and then having like that as a product about yourself, for yourself, made by yourself. It's just like, it's the most personalized, like it's not even therapeutic. It's more just like some type of relationship that is just completely unique with oneself. And again, I guess I'll just go over the pillars since this will be the last time I ever do for a bit. But yeah, your organismic being is basically like your intuition and your feelings of anything that is like wrong or right. And when you sense that something is wrong and your organismic being is protesting, that means that you need to adjust something. And in my experience, the other three elements, the agency, gratitude, and generative drive, are the things that need adjustment. And so when it goes to agency, obviously that's, the sense that you have control over your own behavior and the actions that you're putting out into the world. And usually that's, again, where the adjustment occurs. So, identifying some element within what you're doing that you can change or alter or add or subtract from or to. Gratitude is obviously kind of using some of those reframing tactics to look at the situation, and if you don't like the story that you're telling yourself, trying to figure out a more advantageous way to describe the narrative. There's no story that is objectively true, in my opinion, and so the malleability there means that you can basically go through a Rolodex of options until something resonates with you. And that's, again, it's that resonation, it's that organismic being, or ormanistic being, sort of singing in delight and pleasure when you finally resonate with the story that you're telling yourself. And I think most recently, in the most meaningful way anyway, like the way that ChatGPT was able to reframe my search for a computer was when I really felt like in harmony with like what I was about to do and where I was prior to making that decision, which, again, was basically just ChatGPT saying that I was basically going to get a MacBook for the price of a Windows computer. And I was like, all right, I'm in. That's what I needed to hear, It's like I know what I want, and I know that it may not exist in the exact form that I prefer, but if I can think of a way to frame everything so that I feel like I'm not tricking myself or being otherwise, like, not taken advantage of, but just dropping the ball with respect to my own desires, then that will help with me being at peace with the decision, you know? So, that's agency. Gratitude, again, I guess that's gratitude. Gratitude is being happy with the story you're telling yourself and being happy that you have the opportunity to be a part of that story, if not the protagonist. And then generative drive, you know, that's just doing something, making something, rather than just purely consuming, you know. The bar is low for generative drive. It can be as simple as doing the dishes, and it can be as vast as biking a continent, you know. It's just the idea that, like, you are affecting the environment is not purely affecting you, you know. You're impacting it or something. You know, whatever. If you want more info on all that, go listen to the Conti Huberman episode. Probably my favorite episode ever from that podcast. I actually keep it downloaded on my phone as an offline file so that I can listen to it at any time should the mood strike me. And I've listened to it now 4, 5, or 6 times. I don't even know. Who even knows, my dude? Not me. So, that's the biggest thing that I feel like I took away from this trip. And that's the reason why I knew that it would be worth it, because I felt like, given my prior experiences on all the other trails, on all the other trips, on all the other bike rides, everything, I was like, there's usually something, you know, that I can distill from that experience. And since I made podcasts, I can actually confirm that through analysis of the material. But for this one, for sure, being conscious of the fact that there was likely something to be distilled from it to begin with, I was just like, well, I'm going to try to be even more aware of that possibility as the process goes on. And yeah, within the 3 months, that's kind of where I feel like I arrived at, you know. And your attention is your most valuable resource, my dude. We are in an attention-based society. Economy, I think is what I was trying to say, but again, I'm still a little tired. And so, yeah, like, you know, it's very, very important these days to know what is worth ignoring. And, you know, you ignore what is worth ignoring at your peril, my dude. Or perhaps I should say one does. I do. I statements. That's another important learning lesson from this trip. Always use your I statements. Never speak specifically. Always be broad and vague. Because, you know, what are the chances that you're even accounting for your own feelings properly, let alone those of another person or a group of people? Always good to remember that. But yeah. So, on a final note, I have been somewhat, I was listening to some very, very old episodes of this podcast called Dicks and Janes. Shout out to the Scarborough dude, which is one of the first podcasts I ever started listening to, and a huge inspiration for whatever you can call the style that I have for this show. This guy, he started making podcasts in 2007, and I found his show, you know, very shortly after it was created. I was trying to learn Japanese, and I had also found out about this other podcast called Kobe Beef, which was of this guy. It was not really linguistic, but it had some elements of that because he was from Osaka, I think, or Kobe probably. And so he actually spoke a dialect of Japanese called Kansai-ben, which is like, you know, I don't know what to compare it to, but it's a little bit slangier than the refined Japanese that you would find in Tokyo, maybe. And he featured a clip from the Dicks and Janes podcast, and I was like, this sounds really cool. And so I've been listening to that show for almost 20 years, which is absolutely insane. You know, I guess 19 to be fair. And so, yeah, I was kind of re-listening to that just based on nostalgia and playing with it a little bit in Notebook LM. And there was this quote that the Scarborough dude, the narrator, the main person in the show, Dicks and Janes, he seems like he quoted it a couple of times in the few episodes that I listened to from 2007, and I really, really liked it. And I guess the second time I heard it, I actually looked it up, and I thought this would be a good quote to like end the podcast with. You know, you can step out of the mind of a moron with this as a takeaway. And it was said by somebody else, so you know it's probably actually worth something more than what I've been saying. So, with that, I will read this, and then I will give you a classic Love You Bye, which is... Alright, this is an E.E. Cummings quote, and I'm going to do my best to read it, because reading is not my forte, nor my preference. To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best, night and day, to make you everybody else, means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight, and never stop fighting. I think that's a cool quote, and yeah, I think that it's also very prescient and just even-handed. Like, one thing that I have learned generally about life doing these kinds of trips is just like, there is no destination, like, and I liked having this trip be really emblematic of that, you know. It's like there was no route, there was no destination, there was no way to measure progress other than just simply adding up miles. So it really was about the journey, if I can be cliche for a minute. And, you know, the idea of getting to a point of some type of perfection is probably one of the most weighty illusions that someone can have about self-improvement. You know, I've given up the idea of perfectionism a long time ago. And in fact, I'm very suspicious and skeptical of it in general, because it's just like, well, what standard are you even appealing to say that something is perfect? Or to what degree does something have to be good enough for you to actually make an action, you know, or to make a decision, or do something, you know? I'd rather just jump in when the situation is good enough, and then figure it out from there, because that's where you're actually going to get the meaningful information to determine if your assumption about what perfection would even look like is tenable at all. And, you know, when it comes to this ride and the route, I found out on the second day that I wasn't going to be able to do it. You know, I could have done things differently, and I guess that's always the push-pull for people. You know, I also don't spend a lot of time, if any, in like a FOMO state. Historically, I liked the idea of inverting those letters and making it MOFO. So instead of fear of missing out, you mix it to MOFO, which is move on, forget options, you know. Just like, don't even worry about it, dude. Not that I want to give advice to anybody. This is like kind of the self-talk that I have in my own head, but it's just like, dude, I don't even care. Like, I wasn't there because I wasn't there, and it's not like I could have been there, because if I could be there and everywhere else, then I wouldn't even be able to be in one place, and that's the only place that I'm at. You know what I'm saying? I think that you do. So, with that, 30 minutes is certainly well enough and good, and yeah, I don't think I'm going to be releasing any future episodes on any kind of specific schedule, but I will make a recurring note on my calendar to at least consider trying to make some sort of a digest about my life for those who are interested, and for those who like the sound of the Notebook LM podcast hosts as much as I do. That sing-songy, kind of neutral, just mellow male and female voice that could be anyone and no one at the same time. So, with that tentative promise, I will leave you with a final love you bye.